Eleanor Whitlock had been searching for the 8th child for weeks. Her journey led her to an abandoned village in the English countryside. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, and the buildings stood in eerie disrepair, their empty windows staring like hollow eyes. There was no sign of life, no birds, no rustling leaves, no distant chatter. Just silence. Her instincts screamed that something was wrong, but the thought of the 8th child, another soul in need of saving, pushed her forward. As she entered the town square, a piercing scream cut through the silence. She turned sharply, her heart pounding, and saw a boy no older than 10 sprinting through the cobbled streets, his face pale with terror. Behind him thundered a monstrous figure. The Headless Hunter. The creature was enormous, standing nearly 7 feet tall with broad shoulders and a muscular frame. In his hand, he wielded a massive, blood-stained axe. Despite his lack of a head, his movements were precise, as though guided by an unseen force. His every step echoed like a drumbeat, and the ground seemed to tremble beneath his boots. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward the boy, placing herself between him and the hunter. "Run!" she shouted at him. The boy hesitated, his wide eyes fixed on her. "But, go," she commanded, drawing her blade. The boy nodded and disappeared into the shadows of an alleyway as the Headless Hunter advanced. Eleanor raised her weapon, her hands trembling but steady. The fight was brutal. The hunter's strength was unmatched, his axe swinging with devastating power. Eleanor dodged and countered, her movements precise and calculated, but each strike she landed seemed to have little effect. The hunter was relentless, his attacks forcing her to retreat step by step. As the battle wore on, Eleanor's strength waned. Blood dripped from a gash on her arm, and her breaths came in ragged gasps. The hunter raised his axe for a final blow, and as it came down, a brilliant light engulfed her. Eleanor awoke to the sound of laughter. She sat up, her head spinning, and found herself in the same village, but it was alive. The streets were bustling with people, market stalls lined the square, and children played happily. It was the 1800s, judging by the clothing and the horse-drawn carriages. Confused, Eleanor wandered the streets, trying to make sense of what had happened. That's when she saw them. Her twins. "Mommy!" Her heart stopped as 2 small figures barreled into her, wrapping their arms around her waist. It was them, her children, Daniel and Clara. The ones she had lost so many years ago. They looked exactly as she remembered, their faces glowing with happiness. Tears streamed down her face as she knelt to embrace them. How are you here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. A familiar voice answered from behind her. "They've been waiting for you." Eleanor turned to see her grandfather standing there, his face kind and weathered. He had passed away decades ago, yet here he was, alive and well. This can't be real," she said, her voice breaking. "It is," he said gently. For now, Eleanor spent days in the village, living among the people and cherishing every moment with her children. They played, laughed, and shared stories. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt a peace she had thought was lost forever. But it didn't take long for her to realize that something was wrong. Every night, the villagers locked their doors and windows, terrified of the Headless Hunter who roamed the forests. Eleanor learned that the hunter had once been a nobleman, betrayed and beheaded by those he trusted. His spirit now sought vengeance, and anyone who ventured into the forest after dark became his prey. The villagers begged Eleanor for help, sensing her strength and courage. They believed she was the one who could end the hunter's curse. Eleanor was torn. Solving the mystery meant finding the hunter's head and returning it to his grave, which would break the curse and release the village from its torment. But doing so would also mean leaving this place, and her children, forever. One evening, as she sat by the fire with her grandfather, she voiced her anguish. "How can I leave them again? I've already lost them once. I can't do it again." Her grandfather placed a hand on hers. "Eleanor, I understand your pain. But this village isn't real, it's a place caught between worlds, a reflection of what was and what could have been. Your children and I are at peace. You need to find peace too, and that means doing what's right." Tears filled her eyes. "But I don't want to lose you." "You won't," he said softly. "We'll always be with you. But you have a greater purpose, Eleanor. You've saved so many lives already. Don't let this be the end. With a heavy heart, Eleanor agreed. She ventured into the forest, braving its darkness and the hunter's wrath. Through old journals, whispered legends, and her own intuition, she pieced together the story of the nobleman's betrayal. She found his head buried beneath an ancient oak tree, hidden by those who had sought to erase his memory. The moment she unearthed the skull, the forest erupted in chaos. The headless hunter appeared, his axe raised high. Eleanor stood her ground, holding the skull aloft. Your suffering ends here, she shouted. A blinding light erupted from the skull, enveloping the hunter. His body convulsed, and for the first time, Eleanor saw his face, a man filled with sorrow and regret. Thank you, he whispered before vanishing into the light. Eleanor found herself back in her own time, clutching the skull. The eighth child, the boy she had saved, stood before her, his eyes wide with awe. You did it, he said. Eleanor smiled, though her heart ached. We did it. She had left her children and her grandfather behind, but their love and guidance remained with her. Her journey wasn't over, but she knew that every step she took brought her closer to the peace they had found, and the hope she could still bring to others.